Hello and welcome back to Top TV, where we are covering Severance Season 2. We are now on episode 6, Attila, written by Erin Wagoner, directed by Uta Briesewitz, and original release date of February 21st, 2025. Synopsis was, bonds are tested, Mark continues on his path of discovery. So I forgot to mention this on last episode, even with the notes I take and everything, just totally forgot. And I realized it as soon as I was done recording, pretty much, maybe half hour later. I did not mention that last week with the hang in there from episode 4, when Irving is getting shut down. He is told to hang in there by he tells Dylan to hang in there, and people were speculating that is a reference to the poster in the break room. And sound theory, and it turned out to be correct because during the funeral that they were having, he sees the hang in there poster and he decides to check behind it, and there is directions to the exports hall / testing floor elevator that says from O&D. I know I saw some people think it said from Dad, but it's from O&D. And this episode kind of kicks off with the innies talking about that. We first start off with Mark, of course, telling Ragabi what he had just seen at the end of last episode, where he saw Gemma for the first time and that she didn't recognize him. And he's, crying over this. And then we have, cut to Dylan telling Helly and Mark about finding the note with directions to the exports hall. And during this, Mark doesn't want to leap into it right now. Neither does Dylan. Dylan left the note there. He didn't want to be caught with it because obviously he's getting to see his wife Gretchen through the outie family visitation suite. So he kind of mentions that too. Like, I didn't want to get caught. Like, he didn't say why, but we, the viewer, know why. And Helly has like a great line of like, did you guys sever your balls or something? Because she wants to go get it. But during this, Mark opens up the fridge and we start seeing items from his fridge, and he's starting to have some more reintegration glitching. And I think from there we kind of cut to the Severance title or the theme song. But then we have Milchick taking the rest of the day off of his duties, and he's working on the areas of improvement from his performance review. So we see him, practicing paper clipping so much that his hands are shaking after doing so much paper clipping. And he starts trying to not use as many big words. He had actually just told Miss Huang, like, hey, you're kind of handle the floor. And then, said something about her childish frivolities or whatever he was saying about frivolous, childish stuff she was doing. And then we have him kind of practicing in the mirror, saying it with different words, and then eventually just shouting, grow up. And I think it's funny that this is something that was one on the performance review. Like, who complained about it? I guess it's Miss Huang, especially with her being a kid, right? And then getting, like, Miss Cobell used to talk kind of like this. This is kind of like the language of Severance, I feel like, right? Maybe it's just because Milchick and Cobell kind of say these odd sentences at times, are very proper. So it's interesting to get Milchick saying stuff like grow up and practicing in the mirror for this. Also, I mentioned how quick he had a performance review last time. Yeah, apparently I forgot this too. They mentioned in the episode it was a monthly performance review. So every month he gets one of these, which will be crazy. That is crazy. We also learn that Miss Huang has some sort of internship at the facility, which is why she's a child, right? So I know there was all those weird theories people had of like, why is she a child and all this kind of stuff. And I think the show's kind of poking fun at that a bit because of her, answer in the first episode. Is because when I was born, it's not just a sarcastic comment or a, comment that is actually truthful, but not the answer we're looking for. I do think she is just like, I keep seeing people on like the Facebook group and Reddit and stuff be like, we need to find out why she's so weird. Or like, did anybody see that she wasn't as weird this episode? And I'm like, I don't think she's ever really been weird. I think it's weird that a child is there. Um, but I don't think she's ever been weird. She has like the fake smile stuff or like the politeness, but then also being like a manager, like, hey, I'm actually not your friend, right? As she told Mark in the season 2 premiere. But overall, I think she's been like pretty normal. Um, Even to the point of she's not working at one point; she's just playing that little Kier bubble game thing. So I think I think it's just that this is an internship, probably for like isn't there like a girls' school, right, for Kier or something, like probably an internship from there, and that's what Milchick is saying that she won't be able to winter hide or something, right, which is something that he was saying that like he wouldn't grant her that or it would mess up with that. So I do think that is just kind of a uh, normal kid stuff. So I'm not actually, but yeah, it's like a fellowship or internship with Lumen. Um, so there you go. I think that's the answer. Like, I don't think we're gonna then find out. Like, I've seen people speculate, kind of like, hey, because she's Asian, she is Gemma's clone or child or something. And I think that's a little, a little bit of a stretch there. Um, People people do that kind of stuff all the time. Not just because of, I wouldn't say like racism, but like kind of like stereotypes or whatever. But there are a bunch of people that, of course, also speculating on white people being related to other white people. But it seems like when there is a minority character and then a second minority character enters that's the same race, a lot of people start jumping to that stuff instead of, just thinking that we could have multiple characters of that race. Um, Mark and Helly talk in the bathroom, and he tells her that they had sex, and Helly's upset. He says, "I thought it was you," and apologizes. And this is something I'm glad they didn't drag out. Um, is during this, like, yeah, I feel like some shows, and this happens in like, let's say I can pull it out of my head here, Smallville, when Bizarro acts like Clark, and Clark's like, you should have known me better than anybody, type of thing. Well, one, that's not the case really for Helly, I think, because she's like a week and a half to 2 weeks old, right? She's not very old yet. Only been working there for a little bit. And it's also like, just, it was somebody acting like you, right? Like, there was maybe some hints. Some viewers thought it was Helly, right? Like, I thought it was Helly for a bit. So some uh some people obviously knew right away, some people didn't. And with her wanting to like have sex with Mark, he's thinking like, oh my god, this is great, the girl I have a crush on at work wants to have sex with me, this is awesome, right? That's probably his thought process. While um she's wearing, like, using her body, using her face, talking like her, she'd studied them, right? Like, this is a huge breach of trust from Helena, not so much so from Mark, right? So I'm glad that like eventually in this episode she came around to it and said, "Look, that means you wanted to do that with me because you thought it was me." And she wants to have her own memory of sex, right? And asks if he's interested, and of course he is. So they go to this, like, covered up department, abandoned department, and have sex and make their own little tent with like the plastic coverings. Um, but that was, I'm glad they didn't spend too much time on you should have known it was me. It wasn't me. How could you think it was me? All that kind of stuff. Like they did a little bit of that last week, and they did a little bit of it this episode, and that was it. But like I said, some shows would drag that out for like half a season or like a 10 episode arc or 5 episode arc, and we're not getting that. So I'm very glad that she was able to. I think that's one thing about this show that really works for me is that these characters act like what I think humans would act like in these type of situations. You're not getting like it doesn't seem like a lot of contrived stuff to make drama or you know yeah, to make drama to then make the show continue to go on, right? Like this is a show I feel like that knows its characters, knows its purpose, and goes in and handles, you know, uh, stuff in a way where these can feel like real people. You know, last week, Mark was when he found out that it was Helena, not Helly, was very distant to her, and I felt like it was a very normal reaction, almost like shutting down of like I'm not gonna talk to you. I'm just gonna get my work done, so I don't get hurt again, so I don't get messed with. I can't trust you right now. And then when he does finally find out it is Helly in this episode or last episode, and then you know uh, starts to really realize this is Helly, he starts to kind of open back up again and realize, oh, this is my friend. I can talk to her about stuff. So again, that's stuff that in some shows would be played out for a long arc. This was a 2 episode thing pretty much, and we are moving on. Um, while this is going on, though, Dylan is in the Outie family visitation suite, and he's meeting his wife again, Gretchen, and they're talking about like how he's taken a whole bunch of other classes. Like I think like pottery class was one of them, or like he scuba diving was one of them. Like he's done a lot of stuff. And I thought the way Dylan is giving his Outie the benefit of the doubt, and I think it's something that could be true. If you're taking a lot of classes like that, some people would say, "Oh, it's his flavor of the month," right? Like he's really into pottery right now, and he's going to move on to scuba diving, and then he's going to move on to this thing. Is Dylan looks at it as maybe he's trying to find something he excels at the way I do down here. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it because I'm not sure how Gretchen sees it yet, right? Gretchen, I think, is kind of over Dylan Outie Dylan right now, Dylan George, because and I don't mean like over like divorce. I mean like over like he keeps spending these money on these frivolous things, um, and we don't really have it right now. So we have kids, we have bills. We're both working to try to meet that and make the money and survive. So I think she sees it as more like frivolous things that he's like hobbying and trying out. While I think Dylan's point is probably a little valid here of maybe it's something he's trying to find and that's something that he's actually good at or excels at. We've seen a little bit of Outie Dylan, and a lot of times he's watching TV or taking care of the kids, and it seems like he doesn't really have anything. So I'm thinking part of him is probably like trying to find purpose. And I think this is the kind of the downside. And we don't know how long this has been if he was like this at other jobs or something where he just kind of is like this after work anyway. I think we all kind of find ourselves after work just wanting to chill and watch TV or you know uh, not be not be doing a lot of manual labor intensive stuff after we've worked for 8 hours. But I do think that like maybe this is kind of the downside of being severed, right? Because there are times when you're at work and you excel at something and you're like, man, I feel a little bit of fulfillment there. I just did something that was really great. I aced a meeting or I aced a presentation and I really aced that thing I do at my job. And it kind of gives you a little bit of boost, confidence, things like that. That Dylan outie Dylan is not getting. We don't think he gets that type of boost. Now they've talked before about how some people, when they leave the severed floor, feel like, oh, they're a little fulfilled because they like some of that stuff transcends the chip, right? Where like how tiredness or refreshing has kind of fills both. Like they say like when you leave work, sometimes you will still feel tired, right? Because your body still did the work, you still went through the workday, and then like innies will feel the refreshed effects of sleep the next morning. So some of that stuff transcends. So maybe there are times where if you like, or if you're innies really riding an emotional high or the adrenaline and um, those type of things, that you might leave the building and think, oh, I must have done good today, or I did a lot of work today. But you don't know what you did. You don't know what you're doing. And, he could be sitting there and maybe these, that's the thing too. We don't know like if these hobbies that he's been starting to do are because he started working at Lumen and Severed, or if this is something he's always done. And part of his, like, as Dylan originally thought, his screw up nature of not being able to hold a job until this one, really, right? So I think it's just cool how Dylan kind of looked at that and said, hey, maybe he's just trying to find something that he excels at the way I excel down here. And it's a kind of a nice, generous reading. And I think I see Gretchen kind of think like, oh, maybe, and but she is really smitten with any Dylan. And they actually end up scooting a little closer and kissing. That's as far as we know it went, right? But this is at the same time Mark and Helly are having sex, so who knows? But I think we're starting to see, again, my kind of theory that the innie of the person is maybe like kind of how these people were before they were severed. Or, in this case, this kind of might remind her of the man that she fell in love with, while like the monotony of the daily grind has kind of got rid of their romance. Any Dylan is, falling for her and just wants to talk about her and hear about her, right? I think he has a line like that in here, like, I really like talking to you. And because I think she even mentions like maybe he's just trying not to spend time with us when he's doing these hobbies, and he's like, no, I don't think that would be it. Like, I want to spend time, like, that's all I want to do is spend time with you and hear about my offspring and stuff. I love that he used the word offspring. So those are, I love these visit maybe that's what we'll call them, the outie visitation scenes. And I want to get more of them. I wonder like how much we're going to get. We got 4 episodes left of the season. Like how many more times do we get to see this? But when Dylan is at home and he asks, how did it go at Lumen with me? Gretchen lies and says it was canceled. They didn't say why, but it was canceled. Maybe you were busy. And that is interesting. It's almost like she's cheating on her husband with himself because of the innie. And I think ultimately the goal of this show will be, one, to kind of figure out what Lumen's doing. But also, I do think part of the goal here is the end game, I would say, is these characters all reintegrating. And what you can do with that, you can have Helly reintegrating with Helena and it making her a better person and seeing that innies are people and maybe shutting down what the company is doing. With Innie and Outie Dylan merging, you would get, a happiness for Dylan that he's doing something, that he was able to do something good at his job. I mean, Lumen would probably be shut down in this fantasy series finale I'm having in my head here. But that he would rediscover the love for his wife and kids, definitely his wife, in more like romantic way than just, oh yeah, what are we doing today? What's for dinner? Type of relationship that they seem to have. And what you would have with that is, you know, any Dylan bringing his love of Gretchen and kind of his innocentness that he has, right? And it merging with outie Dylan, making him a fool, you know, making these people complete, where then it makes Gretchen think, okay, there's the man I loved. There's the man I married. He's still in there. And they merge, and like the best of the innie and the best of the outie are what we see. With Mark, we don't know how that will go. There's a whole thing at the end of the episode we're going to be getting to soon. But that's kind of what I would see with with the goal of the show, is reintegrating a lot of these characters and maybe giving them that happy send off. I could be wrong though, because that seems more like if we were wrapping the show up next season, that's what it would kind of be. They said they have a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan, I think, or a 6-year plan, that depending on how many seasons they get here. We didn't talk about this last week because I think the news broke shortly after I recorded earlier this week. But this is now the most watched show on Apple TV. And I've seen some people say, well, yeah, of course it is, because it's, season 2 has now dropped, and like Apple TV Plus is on Android and has grown, obviously since Ted Lasso has premiered. True. But I feel like for a while, like Ted Lasso is pretty well known. Even from people that didn't have Apple TV, I'd have them ask me about Ted Lasso. I knew somebody in my office that watches Ted Lasso. I don't know anybody that watches Severance still in my personal life, which is heartbreaking. But that type of stuff is like, it's surprising to me, because Ted Lasso was really, really a hit, and kind of got Apple TV Plus more on the map. I mean, it's kind of broken into pop culture a bit, right? Like, I feel like there's been parodies of it. There's been references to it and other stuff that I've noticed. So yeah, obviously you have a growing user base of Apple TV Plus. But also, I think when you have like the marketing that they did at the beginning of this season with the Grand Central Station stuff, with interviews with Ben Stiller on, like, I guess every late night show, and getting out there, podcasts. Adam Scott was out there with podcasts. Like, there's been a real push that Apple has put on this show this season, and it's paid off, because people have been checking it out. I've seen that online. People being like, oh, I finally decided, the Grand Central Station thing interested me, or I finally saw a trailer and it interested me. And now the most watched Apple TV Plus series of all time. If you look any day right now, it is number 1 on the Apple TV charts when you look at the positioning there. So, feeling pretty good about a chance of a season 3. I just wish it would go into official renewal so they can start really making work on it. But I do know that they already opened the writers' room and they're starting to do that. So hopefully we start filming sometime this year, and we don't have a 3-year wait, hopefully. Okay, so while Mark and Helly are walking back, they start kissing again. He, pushes her up against the wall and kisses her. And he sees that she's bleeding, and she's like, no, that's you bleeding. It's from his nose. And we know that I think Petey had that as well. So we're starting to really see some of the same reintegration stuff that is not good. Not good. Ragabi has said that she is now better at it. And so far, we have not seen that to be the case. I wish we would have got more of Petey stuff too. We obviously saw some from Petey's point of view with the glitching and stuff, but he also had like really good knowledge of, like, when he goes up to Mark in episode 1 and says, "Hey kids, what's for dinner?" Like, he knew the joke. He knew, like, you're my best friend. I'm your best friend. You're my very good friend type of thing. Like, he knew that kind of stuff without having to have the glitches, and then he would just continue to have glitches by not following Ragabi's stuff. But Mark is following everything Ragabi is saying to do right now, and it is not looking good with the bleeding from the nose. They go to Miss Huang to get it looked at, and then this is again he experiences reintegration here, and he's actually in his basement, and they have, it was a close memory or something, like a really recent memory, which is what Ragabi says. Oh, this is great, and we don't actually know if it's great. We don't know. We don't know if she knows if it's great. Like we don't know what she knows. I've seen some theories where people think that she is like an agent of Lumen doing this to like make it worse or like test reintegration. I don't know if I believe that. I do think maybe she is part of like this resistance group here. I just think she doesn't know what she's doing, or she has like ideas, and he's unfortunately the lab rat, the way Petey was the lab rat. And maybe Petey felt that and was like, I'm not listening to you anymore. And he wasn't answering the phone with her, right? Like he wasn't. He was trying to get to Mark instead and doing things a different way. Unfortunately for him, he dies. But I don't know what she knows. I wish we would get more with Ragabi. She's starting to appear a little bit more, obviously, because of this deal that she's making with Mark. But I really hope that maybe we get like a Ragabi episode at one point or something. Like I use the term like Lost, because like Lost, you'd be like, because of the flashbacks, we'd be like, when are we getting a Richard episode or a Jacob episode? Because you're looking for the flashbacks that would fill in that stuff. I would love to get some Ragabi flashbacks of what caused her to leave Lumen and what makes her so anti-Lumen right now, where she is fully trying reintegration. Is it because of stuff she saw? Is it something to do with Gemma? Because she knows that this kind of manipulated Mark into doing this? Or is it just she got laid off and it's like they must pay now? Or, like what is her motivation in this is something I'm still questioning, and I would love to see some Ragabi flashbacks or an episode or a conversation even where she kind of details why she's doing this. So during this, all of this stuff going on, Mark, storms out. He's going to go to dinner. We'll kind of come back to that. But Irv is going to meet with Burt and his husband, Fields. This is something that was set up last week when Burt and Irv talk, and he's like, I just want to know who, I follow people who show up to my house type of thing, and invites him to dinner. And so he shows up this week, ready, Irv does, to have dinner, and Fields is played by John Noble, who is great, by the way. People may know him as Denethor from Lord of the Rings. I know him more from that, but like I was a big Fringe fan. Oh my god, like 12 years ago now. This is when I first watched Fringe, and John Noble is great in Fringe. Really great as Walter in Fringe. So I recommend checking that out if you really like John Noble here. But Fields is going to get tipsy here. And they have some uncomfortable conversations in front of a guest. Have you ever been this before where you're like Irv and like a couple's fighting and you're hanging out with them or something? You're like the only other one there. It's kind of awkward. You're like, oh, what am I supposed to do right now? I don't know. You just let them and then they apologize like, sorry, we shouldn't be arguing. You're like, oh no, it's fine. Like I get it. But you are uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable if you're Irv in this situation. But Fields gets tipsy and blurts out at one point, because originally they mentioned, what made you start working at Lumen, and they say this like this might be a true story for them. I don't know. This is a bizarre story of we're in love, but apparently Burt has done something so bad he is destined to go to hell. Is like the agreement between the two of them, like, oh no, you're going to hell. It doesn't seem like it's because they're gay, right? Like, which is some religions' interpretations. Because, like, John Noble's Fields is like, I would be in heaven, and I need somebody up there with me. So, very weird. Like, what did Burt do that they're both of them like, yeah, he's going to hell. No problem. But, like, a pastor is talking about Severance and mentions that the innie has a soul as well that is separate from the outie. So if Burt gets severed and is a good person in Lumen, he would go to heaven, any Burt, and outie Burt would go to hell. and Fields would still have a Burt in heaven with him. A crazy, crazy explanation of how you ended up at Lumen, which I'm not sure if we're supposed to believe anyway, because there's something Fields kind of slips up on here. But I don't know if I'm making my job decisions based off of like afterlife decisions. Like, oh, my husband wants me to be in heaven with him, so I'm going to get severed. So hopefully my innie is a good person that goes to heaven. We don't know what your innie is doing, and with what Lumen's doing, any bird's probably going to hell as well. But just kind of an odd situation, odd discussion to have here at dinner. And Fields kind of slips up here and says that at one point that Burt had worked at Lumen for 20 years. 20. And catches Irv. Irv points this out. The first severed case was 12 years ago. Oh, yeah, 12 years. Sorry, 10 years, whatever he's been working there. What's going on here, right? This is interesting because during this whole time as well, Mr. Drummond is going into Irv's house and looking at the notes that he had taken, finds them pretty easily. Like, did Burt tell Drummond that Irv was not going to be there? Is he a Lumen spy? Or, is Drummond watching Irv because they fired him and is like, I got to make sure what this guy's up to here? And sees that he leaves, then goes to and checks. I could see something like that. But the little slip up here of 20 years versus 10 or 12 is puzzling. Because if that's true, he's been there 20 years. I mean, he worked there before Severance, which means their whole like thing about the pastor telling them stuff is a lie. Unless if that is then was the impetus for them to become severed while he was still working at Lumen. So that story could still work, but they were saying it more of like that's how he got the Lumen instead of that is how he decided to get severed. So I mean, it could work either way, but really curious to see what's going on with Burt. And Fields excuses himself because Fields is a little upset. Just I think that his husband has a lover through work. This is a weird situation. Lots of throuple stuff going on here in Severance, where they mention in the first episode that Cobell was trying to make a throuple with Innie Mark and Outie Mark, but we now also have like an actual throuple of Irv, Burt, and Fields, like them inviting Irv in and thinking that this is who they had the relationship with and like wanting to have a conversation with them. It doesn't, of course, turn into a throuple thing because Fields is hurt and does excuse himself. But I'm just saying, like, what was the goal here with getting Fields to have dinner with your potential lover? Like, it's kind of really scummy of Burt here. But we have, Fields asks, like, do you think your innies had, like, unprotected sex? And we don't know. We've seen them in, like, the garden together. I would assume they haven't had sex without us, like, seeing a better hint to suggest this. So I think it's just this kind of more innocent love that they seem to have had in the first season. But, what Lumen is telling Burt is that he was fired, or that's the thing too. Burt was told he was fired instead of what we saw is that he was retiring. So that's either a lie because Burt made the video too, saying that he was retiring. Now I do think that would be like again, just say you're retired, so that way it gives your innies, like a good thing, or we'll make sure that you have a good like reputation, right? But Burt said that he was fired for having like a entanglement with another innie, and I'm guessing that's what he told Fields. It's either all of this or Burt already like if Burt is a spy and in on this stuff, then he knows exactly what he's doing, and this is all a big lie anyway. But if he told Fields that he had an entanglement, an entanglement with somebody, then you can kind of see Fields getting defensive here and asking these questions, and he even mentions like he was supposed to be in heaven with me because of the innie, but like one, the innie doesn't even know who you are, dude. Right? Like that's another thing that I think they didn't in their whole story. It doesn't really make any sense in that regard. Of like maybe you can find your way to him and be like, hey, your outie was my husband, but your innie might have connections with other people that they want to spend afterlife with, right? So just really interesting stuff here with the religion aspect, and do they have souls? Do they not have separate souls? I thought the pastor's discussion here was really, really great of like them having separate souls. Um, so everything that they're doing as an innie is not affecting like their outie's chances at an afterlife, which is something you would wonder with maybe what they're doing. We don't know what they're doing. I think we'll find that out in the finale because it's titled Cold Harbor. So I'm assuming he finishes Cold Harbor or gets close to finishing it, and we figure out what it is. So during this, Mark is eating at a like Chinese restaurant, and Helena walks in and walks up to him, talks to him, and they have like this like flirtatious thing where you're seeing, Helena was posing as Helly for a couple weeks, right? And Mark, any Mark has no idea. Well, outie Mark has no idea that Helena was acting as Helly. He has no idea that she was on the severed floor, any of that at this point. So he just, you know, doesn't know what she's trying to get from him. But she's trying to seemingly get information about the OTC and asking him questions about, like, what did you see up there? I guess wondering to see if he would be truthful, which he dodges, right? I think forget what he says exactly, but he does. She knows the real answer to this from any Mark telling her in the premiere. So I guess kind of gauging where outie Mark sits with this, especially knowing that it is his wife that's down there. Or maybe she's trying to find out if that's true. We don't know what Helena knows, right? That's another thing for me. Like she knows Cold Harbor is a big thing, but does she know Cold Harbor is Gemma? Does she know that Mark is important in regards to that? They mention he's important, but is it just because he's doing a good job? Like his cube thing for Allentown was supposedly, I think I heard this in a podcast or written interview somewhere with the creators, where they said it was supposed to be like uh, it's just a thing that he's given, right? He didn't get he didn't have like the finger traps or whatever, but it's because he came up with a way or like was able to do that Allentown refinement so quick and was able to kind of like do a different way where he was able to shorten their time doing any of these files. That's interesting. What does that mean, right? And does Allentown then have a connection with Mark in the sense of was that somebody else that he was doing whatever he's doing to Gemma on with Cold Harbor? Those type of things are stuff I assume will get answered later on. But we don't know what Helena knows. She kind of tells him here she kind of runs the company. So maybe she does know all of this stuff. But maybe she is also trying to figure out, wait, what? Like we have his spouse down there? Maybe that's new to her. Maybe that's something she didn't know. And that could be a friction point with her and her dad or something. Like I could see them going that route, but I could also see them going the route of that Helena is just like evil and is the one kind of behind this stuff, all of it, right? That's what I'll be curious to know is like, what does Helena actually know? What is the board doing that she doesn't know? Could be stuff like this. So maybe she's trying to figure out like, hey, will he tell me here that like something about his wife? Um, and I think she kind of tests it a little bit here when she says it must have been hard when Hannah died. And he corrects her and says Gemma. We do know that I believe in the first episode he calls her Gemma and also says Miss Casey, but like that she had a different name or something, right? Like I believe that was known, so maybe that's her way of verifying the claim that way. Um, or it's just kind of like a dick move of I'm going to purposely get your wife's name wrong because you had sex with me and I want you. She seems kind of stalkerish. She seems kind of obsessed. I think last week when he's leaving the office, we see her kind of watching him from the lobby. She seems kind of Mark obsessed. Not sure why. But, he leaves and he gets home and tells Ragabi, let's do it. Let's flood the chip. And they do the surgery. And while they're doing the surgery, right after that, he sees the sex that he was having with Helly, which I'm sure is kind of confusing to him. He's like, I just saw Helena at the thing. Maybe this is why she came up to me. I don't know if he thinks that she's severed or not. Like, this is all new to him, unless if then that any part of him is like, this is Helly I was having sex with. Like, he needs to make those connections. We don't know how they'll make those connections yet. But during this, he's really having problems with, his head. And Devin knocks on the door, and he's like, she sees my car is there. She knows I'm here. I have to go answer this door. And he forces himself to go answer this door while Ragabi hides in the basement. And Devin and Mark have this conversation. She's like, hey, are you still doing that light method? I have like a different way that might do it. And he's like, actually, I'm doing something else. And this conversation kind of escalates a bit because he's not telling her. And then he's trying to grab the cup of water and he can't. He's just moving his hand, but he can't like grip it. And then he says like, what is that smell? And then collapses. And they had people on staff to be able to tell them that they're doing the surgeries right and everything. I would assume that they have this stuff checked, but typically that burning smell, if that's what it was, he just said a smell. But if it's like a burning smell, like burnt toast, he's having like a stroke. And he collapses, and Ragabi comes out, and Devin's like, "Who are you?" She's like, "I'm just trying to help him." We don't know where Mark stands with this right now, and I have a theory because next week's episode is called Chikai Bardo, and it says an old romance intersects with a deadly present threat. So Bardo is like a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and it's like a stage between death and rebirth. So my thought here is maybe he's like technically dead or like in this limbo here, and we're gonna get flashbacks to his relationship with Gemma, which is why it says like an old romance intersects with a deadly present threat, the deadly present threat being his stroke. And so maybe we get flashbacks of his relationship with Gemma, almost like a light flashing before your eyes type of thing. And that he is like hanging in the balance. And then when he awakes, this rebirth from the Chikai Bardo will be him fully reintegrated. And maybe Ragabi does know what she's doing. And maybe Ragabi will have like a fully integrated person where he's no longer having those glitches. That's something I could see them doing, like almost like this rebirth, and not like a physical rebirth. Like maybe he's just resuscitated and then he is fully reintegrated because flooding the chip worked. And now he can be fully reintegrated as we go down episodes 8, 9, and 10 towards the finale. Because I've seen some people complain about the pace of the season, saying it's like glacial or that they've been teasing full reintegration for 3 weeks. And I'm like, end of episode 3, he starts reintegration. Episode 4, we have a flash of it. Episode 5, he's still trying to get reintegrated. Like, it's a step. It's not just like a switch, right? We saw that with PD as well. And then this episode, flooding the chip. So Yeah, I think this is kind of the journey of the season, is that he's working to become reintegrated, and I think it might culminate with next episode with his rebirth. I can't see them killing off Mark. I know I said this last week. I can't see them killing off Mark. Ben, I almost said Ben from Parks and Rec. Adam Scott is a producer along with Ben Stiller. He is somebody that is doing a podcast about the show with Ben Stiller. I can't see them killing off the main character of the show. So I do think that this will be kind of like a legally dead for a bit, or some sort of limbo balance, life in the balance type of thing. He's not dead, but he's very close to it. And then he will awaken, fully reintegrate it with his rebirth. Just from the title and stuff, I think that'd be really, really cool thing to do here. It leaves us kind of hanging in the balance for this week, and then you can kind of have an episode where people are worried about Mark, but we're maybe seeing it from Mark's point of view, and we're seeing like memories of him and Gemma, and we get to see what their relationship was like beforehand. Maybe that stuff is fusing with any Mark with his relationship with Miss Casey, and just like he's seeing flashes of it as he's struggling to stay alive as we build towards the to the finale of this season, which will he be able to complete Cold Harbor if he's fully reintegrated? Who knows? But yeah, so that's this episode, Attila, which was named because Attila the Hun, right? Because Burt would call his Fields like Honey, right? And then it shortened to Hun, and then eventually they called each other Attila or something, which is a funny funny way. But that's how relationships are sometimes. You start with one thing and then it gets shorter, and then it changes to something else. Kind of reminds me of the scene from The Office when Michael's introducing Ryan to Daryl, and he says, here's like, Mr. Rogers, and he's like, I'm, hey, I'm Daryl, and Ryan's like, Rogers? He's like, no, Philman. Then it goes Reg, then Reg, then Raj, then then Mr. Rogers. Like how it got Michael to Mr. Rogers type thing. That seems like this. Honey, Hun, Attila, like just making those leaps. But those are how some nicknames are made and stuff. So I think that's really funny. Okay, well, that about wraps up here for this week. Next week, I should be back around the same time. I don't really have anything I think I'm doing. Like, I shouldn't be going out of town again anytime soon. So these episodes should start coming the Friday or Saturday after the episode. And then, yeah, so thank you all for watching and listening. Like I said last week, if you didn't listen to that, I might be jumping into Mr. Robot for stuff next. But I'm also seeing some good stuff on Hulu and Apple that I want to tackle. Let me know. Is Surface good? That's a show on Apple that seems interesting. Is Paradise good? That's something I've heard is good on Hulu, because I can always dive into those too. But if I do miss a robot, I'll probably record those as I watch, and then release those in lulls of the week. I also really want to discuss Lost with my friend Logan, who had watched it for the first time. So that's an episode that might be coming down the pipe here. And then we're also talking about doing a TV theme song draft with with some of my co-hosts, or a tier list or something like that, if only one of them comes on. But my friend Casey was, gave me that idea, and I think that's a fantastic idea, because TV shows have great theme songs. We're kind of out of great theme songs, though I think the Severance one is fantastic, of course. So, but like the days of like the singing theme songs that explain the premise are kind of over with, and I feel like a lot of our picks in that draft would be those very memorable theme songs. But let me know your thoughts. What show should I tackle next after Severance? Should it be Surface? Should it be Paradise? Should it be Mr. Robot? Give me your thoughts, and we'll discuss them. And have a great rest of your week. We'll catch you next time.